over 20%. Intel would turn up the heat. They'd market much harder, they'd coordinate a lot of their technology to release as a kind of landslide, and when AMD's share fell to 5%, Intel would just let up. If you ask Intel, they would say a bit, but frankly, to pulverize a company out of 15% of their market share takes a lot of work, and to not just crush them out of business would mean stopping that. Number 5, you know how I said that Intel licensed the x86 architecture to AMD? They actually licensed their x64 architecture back to Intel because they could easily hold a monopoly in that field. Now what you have here is two good examples of why antitrust laws are necessary. If Intel was the only company allowed to use x86 architecture, all systems built on that would be using Intel chips. They'd have total control. And same with AMD and the x64 architecture. And if either company has total control, they only do things that are in their interest. Whereas if there is competition between the two, in theory, they would want to appear better to the end user, whether it be their corporate clients or their consumer clients. Either way, they have to vie for your approval. And if antitrust laws didn't exist forcing these companies to compete for you, there's a pretty good chance that technological progress would slow down significantly. Number 4, Brian Johnson of Intel is a huge fan of science fiction, and it actually inspires him to set the company's goals and plots out maps for the future, usually casting about 10 years ahead. His job title is actually futurist, which is silly sounding honestly, but considering he works intimately with many employees of the company to develop products based on his forecasting in order to remain, again, competitive, it's a pretty fitting title. Number 3, do you know how Intel got its name? Well, Intel founders Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore wanted to name their new company More Noise, but found out that was already trademarked by a hotel chain, which sounds like a very non-luxurious hotel chain because I associate both those names with, like, computer chips, not like breathtaking views and comfortable beds. So they sat down and they looked at themselves and they said, what do we do? Integrated electronics was a very good descriptor for that. They took out of integrated the INT and electronics the EL, creating INTEL, Intel. I think you probably guessed that from what I was saying, but yeah, honestly, Intel is a much better name than More Noise, which sounds like Pauly Shore saying something is better. It's more noise, buddy. Number 2, the I in the i3, i5, and i7 doesn't stand for anything. According to Intel,